The message came just as Claire lifted her glass of water, the condensation slick against her fingers. Sorry, something came up. Can't make it tonight. 15 words. That was all it took to turn hope into humiliation. The restaurant around her hummed with warmth and laughter, plates clinking, wine glasses chiming, waiters weaving between tables carrying candlelight and comfort. And there she sat, alone, the empty chair across from her a monument to every bad date, every false start, every quiet disappointment she'd promised herself she'd stop believing in. Her throat tightened. She set her phone face down beside the untouched bread basket, determined not to let the tears come. Not here, not tonight. At the next table, a man was watching her, not staring, just noticing. He was alone too, though he didn't look like someone who'd ever been stood up. His posture was easy, his focus steady, his calm presence at odds with the noise of the room. He spoke before she could bury herself in her phone again. That kind of message deserves better lighting than a cell phone screen. Claire blinked, startled. Excuse me? He nodded toward the phone. The bad news text. You read it 3 times and flinched each time. Might as well have had a spotlight over your table. She swallowed, embarrassment flaring. Maybe I'm just bad at hiding it. Or maybe you're too honest to fake it, he said simply, which is rarer than people think. His tone was gentle, unintrusive, and yet something about it made her want to both argue and stay. You sound like someone who studied people, she said cautiously. He smiled faintly. You could say that. Well, she said, picking up her glass again, if you're planning to offer unsolicited advice, tonight's not the night. I wasn't, he said. I was going to offer company. You don't look like someone who should eat alone tonight. She stared at him, wary. Are you hitting on me? Not unless you'd prefer it that way. That caught her off guard. She huffed a small, disbelieving laugh. You're bold, he shrugged. Loneliness makes people do strange things. Sometimes it makes them cruel. Sometimes it makes them kind. Something in his voice softened the air between them. Against her better judgment, Claire found herself smiling. And which one are you? Tonight? He gestured toward the empty chair. Maybe just kind. For a long moment she considered. Then with a small, resigned sigh, she said, Fine, but if this turns into a therapy session, I'm leaving. Deal, he said and signaled the waiter to bring another glass. When he sat across from her, she got her first real look at him. His suit was simple but tailored, his tie loosened just enough to look lived in. His features were sharp but not cold, and his eyes, gray, steady, unreadable, seemed to see far more than they should. They talked awkwardly at first. She told him about her job as a nurse, the endless night shifts, the way exhaustion had become part of her bloodstream. He listened, really listened, without glancing at his phone or trying to fill the silence. When she turned the question on him, he hesitated. I run a company, he said finally. What kind of company? The kind that builds things most people never see but everyone depends on, he said. Data systems, infrastructure, a little of everything. So, a CEO? He smiled slightly. Something like that. Sounds important. It used to, he said quietly. Now I'm not so sure. She tilted her head. You don't meet many CEOs who sound unsure of themselves. You don't meet many who admit it, he replied. Claire laughed under her breath. You're not what I expected. Neither are you, he said. Most people in your situation would have left the moment they got that text. I thought about it, she admitted, but I didn't want to waste the reservation. Practical, he said approvingly. I like that. When the waiter came by, the man ordered for both of them. Nothing pretentious, just simple dishes that matched the tone of their unexpected meal. And somehow by dessert, the tension between them had melted into something that felt natural. He didn't ask for her number. He didn't flirt. He just talked. To her, not at her, and it felt like breathing after years of holding it in. When the check came, she tried to protest, but he slid his card forward before she could reach for her wallet. Consider it a small favor for not letting me eat alone, he said. You invited yourself, she said, half smiling. And you said yes, he countered. Outside, the city was washed in rain. The streetlights shimmered across the slick pavement, turning the night into a watercolor painting. Claire reached into her bag for her umbrella, but it wasn't there. Of course, she muttered. Here. He opened his own, black, worn, sturdy, and held it out to her. I can't take that, she said. You'll get soaked. I'll survive, he said with a half smile. You can return it when it stops raining. She hesitated, then took it. And if it never does, then we'll see each other again, he said simply. She looked up at him, rainlight gleaming in his eyes. You're impossible. Maybe, he said, but I think you'll remember me. She didn't reply. She just turned, stepping into the wet night, the umbrella shielding her from the storm. When she glanced back once, he was still standing there, hands in his pockets, rain gathering in his hair, watching her disappear into the glow of the city. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel unlucky. She just felt seen. The rain hadn't stopped. It had been 3 days since that night, and the sky still hung heavy and gray, as if the world itself refused to let go of something it wasn't ready to forgive. Claire sat by the window of her tiny apartment, watching the steady drizzle blur the streetlights below. Michael's umbrella rested by the door, its dark frame leaning against the wall, like a quiet promise she wasn't sure she wanted to keep. She should have forgotten him by now. It had been one dinner, one walk, one conversation that felt too easy, too real, but his voice lingered, calm, certain, the kind that stayed with you when the world went silent. She told herself she wasn't waiting for anything, and yet each time her phone buzzed, she looked too quickly, her heart stuttering in the second before disappointment returned. It was foolish. She barely knew him, and still she couldn't shake the feeling that something about him wasn't finished. By Friday, the hospital was running at full tilt again. Flu season, endless patients. The same faces of exhaustion and quiet heroism in every hallway. Claire had barely slept, but she welcomed the chaos. It was better than thinking. She was reviewing a patient chart at the nurse's station when Dr. Ellison's voice cut through the buzz. Morgan, they want you in conference room B. Claire looked up. Who's they? The foundation reps, he said. Big donors. Apparently one of them requested to observe a shift. You drew the short straw. Claire frowned. Since when do donors shadow nurses? Since they write checks with more zeros than I'll ever see, he muttered. She sighed, shoved the chart into its slot, and headed down the hall. The conference room was all glass and chrome, a place built for conversations about money, not medicine. A small group of executives stood by the windows, discussing metrics and efficiency. And then she saw him. Michael. He turned as if he'd known she was there, his expression unreadable, but unmistakably warm. Miss Morgan. Her breath caught. Mr. Reed. The others glanced between them, sensing something unspoken. You two know each other? One asked, eyebrows raised. Michael's mouth curved slightly. We've met. Claire forced a polite smile. Briefly. Dr. Ellison arrived just in time to break the tension. Mr. Reed will be joining our evaluation this week, he said. He's the foundation's representative overseeing the new equipment funding. Claire stared at him. You're the donor? Michael didn't flinch. Technically, the foundation is. I just signed the paperwork. She swallowed hard, caught between surprise and disbelief. The man who'd offered her his umbrella in the rain, the quiet stranger, was the same man who controlled the fate of half the hospital's budget. The meeting continued, but Claire barely heard it. Words like workflow, efficiency, and resource allocation blurred into meaningless static. All she could think about was the disconnect between the man she'd met that night and the one who now sat at the head of the table, every gesture composed, every sentence precise. When the meeting ended, Michael waited for her in the hallway. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said quietly. More like I'm realizing I had dinner with one, she replied. He smiled faintly. I didn't lie to you. You just didn't tell me you own half the city. Would it have changed the conversation? Of course it would have. That's why I didn't. She crossed her arms. You know, most people like you don't bother pretending they're normal. I wasn't pretending, he said softly. Not with you. Her pulse quickened, though she forced her voice to stay even. Well, now you can go back to being whoever you are in boardrooms. Is that what you think I want? I think people like you always want something, she said. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Maybe I do, but it's not what you think. Before she could respond, Dr. Ellison called her name down the hall, and just like that, the moment broke. The next 2 days were a strange blur. Michael kept his word. He shadowed the staff, observing the systems, asking questions that were sharper than they sounded. But every time Claire turned a corner, he was there, watching, listening, not intruding, but impossible to ignore. Her co-workers noticed too. "Who's the guy?" one nurse whispered. "He's been following you like a shadow." Claire tried to laugh it off. "He's just doing his job." "Uh-huh," the nurse said, smirking. "Sure." That evening, when the ward finally quieted, Claire found Michael sitting alone in the cafeteria. The coffee machine hissed in the background, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. "You know, people are starting to talk," she said, taking a seat across from him. "Let them," he said simply. "That's easy for you to say. You don't have to work here." He leaned back slightly. "Does it bother you?" "Yes," she said too quickly, then softer. "Because it'll hurt me more than it'll ever hurt you." He nodded slowly. "Then tell me where to stand so I don't cast a shadow." Her chest tightened. "You can't. You're too tall for that." He smiled. "Then maybe I'll learn to kneel." She stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or tell him to stop. "You don't get it, do you? The more you're seen with me, the worse this gets." "Then maybe being seen isn't the problem," he said. "Michael," he cut her off gently. "Claire, I don't care what they think. You shouldn't either." "You can afford not to," she said quietly. "I can't." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he stood, leaving his half-empty coffee behind. "You're wrong," he said softly. "You care because you've had to fight for everything. But I see you, Claire, and I think you've already won." He walked away before she could find the words to stop him. And as she sat there under the humming lights, staring at the empty space he'd left, Claire realized something that scared her more than the rumors ever could. She was starting to believe him. The following week, Claire began to notice the shift. It wasn't obvious at first, just a few too long glances when she walked into the break room, whispers that stopped the moment she turned her head. But the murmurs grew louder as the days passed, blending curiosity with cruelty in that way only workplace gossip could. The billionaire's pet nurse. "Guess there's a reason he's always in her ward. Must be nice to have a safety net with a six-figure smile." She'd endured rumors before. Hospitals thrived on them. Tiny fires sparked by exhaustion and envy. But this was different. This time, every whisper carried her name and his. Michael Reed, the man who had given her an umbrella, a meal, and a memory she couldn't stop replaying. Now he was the reason she couldn't walk down a corridor without feeling like she was being studied. She'd told him to keep his distance. He hadn't listened. It happened on a Tuesday night, long past visiting hours. Claire was finishing her shift when she found him in the pediatric wing, kneeling beside a little boy's bed. The boy's laugh filled the room, a soft, weary sound that somehow still carried hope. Michael was showing him how to fold paper airplanes, his sleeves rolled to his elbows, his tie tucked into his shirt pocket. For a moment, Claire forgot to breathe. Then she remembered where they were and who she was. "Mr. Reed," she said quietly from the doorway. "You're not supposed to be here this late." Michael looked up, the corner of his mouth lifting. He couldn't sleep. "I figured planes were more fun than counting sheep." "You figured wrong," she said, stepping closer. "If security finds you in here, I'll be the one answering questions." He stood, careful not to wake the child. "You sound angry." "I'm tired," she corrected. "And this, whatever this is, makes it harder to do my job." He studied her face. "Because people are talking?" She crossed her arms. "Because I work here. You don't." Something flickered behind his eyes, something she couldn't name. "You think I don't understand boundaries." "I think you don't have to," she said. "You live in a world where people open doors for you before you even reach them." He smiled faintly. "You make it sound like a crime." "It's not," she said softly. "It's just not mine." They stood in silence, the hum of the monitors filling the space between them. Then Michael nodded. "All right, I'll keep my distance." She expected relief. Instead, she felt something like loss. "Thank you," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. He gave her one last look before leaving, a glance that said everything neither of them was willing to admit. When he was gone, Claire leaned against the doorframe, staring at the empty space he'd left. The paper airplane sat on the nightstand beside the sleeping boy, a small, fragile thing made to fly. The next morning, her sister called. Anna's voice came through sharp and worried. "Claire, please tell me this thing I'm hearing isn't true." "What thing?" "That you're involved with Michael Reed." Claire pinched the bridge of her nose. "Anna, I'm not. He's just someone I met." "Someone you met who happens to own the hospital you work for?" "He doesn't own it." "He might as well," Anna said. "Claire, you know how this looks. Men like that—" "Stop," Claire said quietly. "You don't know him." "I don't need to. I know how this ends. They sweep in, make you feel seen, and when they leave, you're the one cleaning up the mess." "Anna, I'm your sister. I'm trying to protect you." Claire exhaled slowly. "Then trust me, I know what I'm doing." "Do you?" Anna asked softly. "Because it doesn't sound like it." When the call ended, Claire sat for a long moment, staring at her reflection in the dark window. Her sister's words lingered like a bruise. She'd spent her whole life building walls, between work and want, between survival and softness. And now one man's kindness had somehow cracked them open. 2 days later, she saw him again. He was standing by the elevators talking to Dr. Ellison, their voices carried, low but urgent. "I told you this was a bad idea," Ellison was saying. "You've turned my hospital into a gossip column." Michael's reply was calm, but there was an edge to it. "I'm not here to make headlines. I'm here because people matter more than numbers." "And that nurse," Ellison said pointedly, "does she matter more than your reputation?" The question hit Claire like a slap. She turned before they could see her, retreating down the hall until the voices faded. That night she found a note in her locker. No name, no signature. Just 3 words in careful handwriting. "Meet me outside." She almost tore it up. Almost. But when she stepped out into the drizzle behind the hospital, he was there. "Michael, I didn't write it," he said before she could speak, "but I'm glad you came." She folded her arms. "Why are you still here?" He looked up at the sky, where the rain shimmered under the parking lot lights. "Because I'm not ready to walk away from something that feels real." "Real?" she echoed. "You don't even know me." He smiled faintly. "Then let me." Her heart stumbled. "Michael!" He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "You said once that my world doesn't understand yours. Maybe that's true, but I'd rather try to learn than spend another day pretending mine is enough." The rain fell harder, cold and relentless, but neither of them moved. Finally, she whispered, "You should go." "I know," he said softly, "but I don't want to." And for one dangerous, unguarded moment, Claire wished he wouldn't. By the next week, the whispers had stopped pretending to be whispers. They followed Claire through every corridor of the hospital, slipping between the hum of machines and the echo of her footsteps. They came with polite smiles that lasted a second too long, with sidelong glances from colleagues who used to meet her eyes. She felt them in every quiet conversation that died the moment she entered a room. And underneath it all was one question everyone wanted answered. Who was she to Michael Reed? It didn't matter that nothing had happened. In the eyes of the hospital, perception was truth, and Claire was losing control of hers. By Tuesday, Dr. Ellison called her into his office. He didn't look angry, just tired. "Claire, you've been one of our best nurses for years. You know that." The words were too careful. She braced herself. "What's going on?" He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "You've seen the rumors. You and Mr. Reed are being talked about. The board is concerned." Claire forced a laugh. "Concerned about what? That I'm doing my job too well?" "Don't do that," he said gently. "You know how this works. He's not just a visitor. He's a donor. His name's attached to every department in this building. And now so is yours." Her stomach turned. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying you need to be careful," Ellison said. "Keep things professional. Don't give anyone a reason to question your position here." Claire stared at him. "I haven't done anything." "I know," he said quietly, "but sometimes that's not enough." She spent the next few days trying to disappear. She avoided the cafeteria, volunteered for extra night shifts, and learned the art of moving quickly through hallways without meeting anyone's gaze. But avoiding Michael was harder. He had a way of showing up where she least expected him, standing by the nurse's station, reviewing reports, walking through the children's wing with that same quiet focus that made people trust him instantly. Every time their eyes met, she looked away first. By Thursday, he noticed. That night, she was finishing her rounds when she found him waiting by the elevators. His tie was gone, his sleeves rolled up, the familiar calm in his expression tinged with something heavier. "You've been avoiding me," he said. "I've been working," she replied. "You're too good at pretending that's the same thing." She crossed her arms. "You shouldn't be here, Michael. People are talking." "Let them," he said simply. "They're not talking about you," she shot back. "They're talking about me." His voice softened. "Then tell me how to make it stop." "You can't," she said. "You're the reason it started." He flinched at that. "Claire!" "No," she said, her voice shaking. "You don't get it. You can walk away from this. I can't. This place is all I have." The elevator dinged behind her, but neither of them moved. Michael stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Do you really think I'd let them take that from you? That's not your decision to make." He studied her for a moment, and she saw it. His frustration, his helplessness, the battle between control and care in his eyes. "You're asking me to do nothing," he said quietly. "That's not who I am." "Then maybe you should figure out who you are when you're not saving people," she said. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped inside before he could answer. As they closed between them, she caught the faintest look on his face, something like realization, or maybe regret. The following evening, her sister showed up at her apartment. Anna didn't bother with pleasantries. "I saw the article." Claire froze. "What article?" Anna tossed her phone onto the table. The headline blared from the screen. "Billionaire Michael Reed spotted visiting hospital nurse late at night." Her chest tightened. The accompanying photo showed her walking out of the hospital entrance. Michael a few steps behind her. The caption didn't need context. The damage was already done. Claire sank into a chair. "It's not what it looks like." Anna folded her arms. "I know that, but the world doesn't, and they won't care." Her voice softened. "Claire, you have to let this go. He's not like us. He lives in storms we can't survive." "I told him to stay away," Claire said quietly. "Then make sure he listens." 2 days later, she tried. She found Michael outside the hospital, sitting on a bench near the fountain. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement, painting him in golden shadow. "You shouldn't be here," she said. He didn't look surprised to see her. "You've said that before." "This isn't a game, Michael. That article. People are calling me things I can't repeat." He met her gaze, calm but unwavering. "Then I'll fix it." "How?" she demanded. "You can't fix people's minds." "I can fix what they read," he said. "I can issue a statement." Her heart lurched. "No, that'll only make it worse." "It'll make it true," he said softly. "What?" "That I care about you," he said, "and that I'm not ashamed of it." The words hit her like thunder. "Michael," she whispered, "don't do this." He stood, stepping closer. "I can't keep watching you take the blame for something that's not wrong." "You think this is noble," she said, voice breaking. "You think standing up for me will save me? It won't. It'll bury me." He looked at her for a long time, rain beginning to fall between them. "Maybe," he said, "but at least I'll be there with you." She shook her head, tears mixing with the rain. "You don't belong in the mud, Michael." "Then maybe I've been standing too long in the light," he said quietly. Before she could answer, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the blur of the city. And as the rain soaked through her clothes, Claire realized that for the first time, she didn't know which of them was trying harder to save the other. By Monday morning, the hospital felt like a place she no longer belonged. Every conversation stopped when she entered a room. Every glance lingered just long enough to sting. Even patients seemed to sense the shift in the air, their polite smiles holding a hint of curiosity. So this is the nurse from the article. Claire had learned long ago that silence could cut deeper than words. Today, it carved her clean through. When Dr. Ellison called her into his office, she already knew what was coming. He looked uneasy, tapping his pen against a folder on his desk. Claire, he began, you know how much respect I have for you. You've been one of our strongest staff members, dedicated, reliable, but the board's concerned. She stood stiffly, arms folded. I'm not surprised. They're worried about the hospital's reputation. This kind of publicity isn't my fault, she said sharply. I know, he said quickly, but the story's everywhere now. The board's phones haven't stopped ringing. They want to suspend you for a few weeks, paid leave until things settle. Claire's jaw tightened. You mean until I stop being a liability? Ellison's expression softened. Claire, please. You don't deserve this. But right now, they're trying to protect the institution. She gave a bitter laugh. And who's protecting me? He didn't answer. That was all she needed to hear. The moment she stepped out of the office, her phone buzzed. Dozens of missed calls, unread messages, reporters, social media tags, her sister, him, Michael. She ignored them all. The air outside was cold and wet. Rain had returned, washing the sidewalks with a gray sheen. Claire walked quickly through it, letting the drizzle blur the faces that turned to stare. When she reached the bus stop, a sleek black car pulled up beside her. The window lowered and his voice cut through the rain. Get in! She froze. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you, he said. Please, Claire. The rain drummed harder. Against every instinct, she opened the door and slid inside. Michael looked like he hadn't slept. Dark circles under his eyes, tie loosened, jaw clenched with exhaustion and resolve. You saw the article? She said flatly. I saw everything, he replied, and I'm not letting them do this to you. She turned to him, her voice sharp. You don't get to let them do anything. You started this. His grip tightened on the steering wheel. I tried to protect you. By putting my name in the headlines? By telling the truth, he said. You don't deserve to be treated like a mistake. Claire laughed bitterly. You think truth matters to them? They don't care about truth, Michael. They care about power, and you just reminded them that I don't have any. He met her eyes, steady and unyielding. Then I'll give you mine. You can't fix this with money. I'm not trying to buy you, he said quietly. I'm trying to stand beside you. The words silenced her. For a moment, all she could hear was the rain against the glass. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But belief had always come with a cost she couldn't afford. Drop me off, she said finally. Please. He didn't move. I can make this right, Claire. No, she said, her voice breaking. You can't. Every time you step in, you make it worse. You don't know how to live in a world that doesn't bend for you. He turned toward her, hurt flickering in his expression. Then teach me. She looked at him, truly looked at him. This man who could have everything and still wanted something as fragile as her. You don't need to learn, she whispered. You need to let go. The light turned green, but neither of them moved. Finally, Michael exhaled. If that's what you want, it's what's best. He nodded, the movement slow, deliberate. Then he drove her home in silence. When she stepped out, he didn't say goodbye. He just waited until she closed the door behind her before pulling away into the rain. Hours later, Claire sat on her couch, still in her scrubs, her apartment dim except for the city light leaking through the curtains. Her phone buzzed again, vibrating against the coffee table until the sound became unbearable. With a sigh, she reached for it, ready to delete another flood of messages, when she saw his name. Michael Reed. Turn on the news. Her stomach dropped. She grabbed the remote and switched on the TV. A press conference was underway. Cameras flashed, reporters jostled, and there he was, standing at the podium, rain dripping from his coat collar, eyes unwavering as the world watched. His voice was steady. There's been a lot of speculation about a woman named Claire Morgan, a nurse at St. Augustine's Hospital. I'm here to make one thing clear. She is not my scandal. She is my equal. The room exploded with questions. Michael continued, his voice rising just enough to silence them. She's been vilified for doing nothing wrong, for being decent, for being kind. If that's a crime, then hold me accountable instead. Claire's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table. He went on, eyes fierce but calm. This isn't about wealth or status. It's about how we treat people who can't fight back. and I won't stand by while someone I respect is destroyed for it. The broadcast cut to reporters shouting his name as he stepped away from the microphone. Claire turned off the TV. The silence in her apartment was deafening. She pressed a hand to her mouth, half in disbelief, half in fear. Michael had done the one thing she'd begged him not to. He had made himself part of her story. And now, for better or worse, the world would never stop looking. The next morning, the world knew her name. Claire woke to the sound of her phone vibrating endlessly on the nightstand. Dozens of messages, missed calls, notifications stacked like a wall. She didn't have to read them to know. Michael's press conference had worked its way into every feed, every headline, every corner of the internet that loved a good scandal dressed up as redemption. Billionaire CEO defends a nurse in viral statement. Michael Reed's mysterious woman finally speaks. Silence. Love, power, and reputation. Who is Claire Morgan? She turned off her phone before the world could shove its version of her down her throat. But the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was dread. By the time she made it to the hospital, the damage was done. People stopped her in the hallway, some to offer support, most to gawk. Cameras waited just outside the entrance, blocked by security, but their flashes still spilled through the glass doors like lightning. Dr. Ellison found her before she even reached the ward. His face was lined with tension. You saw it? Claire nodded. Then you understand the position this puts us in. Us, she repeated bitterly. You mean me? He sighed. Claire, I can't defend you publicly if the board decides. I don't need defending, she said sharply. Not from them and not from him. Ellison hesitated. He meant well. That's the problem, Claire said. Good intentions don't stop the fallout. Then stop hiding from it, came a familiar voice behind her. She turned. Michael stood at the end of the corridor, looking composed despite the exhaustion written in the lines beneath his eyes. Claire's heart skipped and hardened. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you, he said quietly. You were supposed to be home resting. Her laugh came out bitter. Funny, I don't remember you being in charge of my life. Ellison looked between them, realizing he wasn't needed. I'll give you two a minute, he muttered before walking off. The moment he disappeared, Claire rounded on Michael. Do you have any idea what you've done? He met her gaze calmly. I told the truth. You told your truth, she snapped. You stood on a stage and decided for me. You didn't ask. You didn't warn me. You just declared it to the world like you were some kind of savior. I didn't do it to save you, he said evenly. I did it because you didn't deserve to carry this alone. Her voice trembled, anger and fear colliding in her chest. You made it worse. You think people are applauding because they understand? They're not. They're dissecting me. Every photo, every word, every smile. You turned my life into a headline. Michael's expression broke, just slightly. I didn't want to lose you to their lies. You already have, she whispered. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Rain streaked the hospital windows, echoing the silence that settled between them. Finally, Michael exhaled. Then let me fix it. There's nothing left to fix. He stepped closer. Then let me stand with you. She looked up at him, her anger cracking under the weight of his sincerity. You don't get it, she said softly. You have the luxury of walking away from this clean. I don't. You'll go back to boardrooms and headlines and deals. I'll go back to whispers and break rooms and a career that's dying because I let a man buy me dinner. He shook his head. No. You'll go back to being the woman who stood her ground when the world tried to tear her down. Because that's who you are, Claire. She wanted to hate him for saying it. Instead, her voice came out small. And who are you, Michael? The man who fixes broken things so he doesn't have to look at his own cracks? He froze. Her words hung in the air like a confession neither of them wanted. Before he could reply, her pager went off. 3 short beeps that snapped reality back into focus. I have to work, she said, already turning away. Claire, don't, she said without looking back. Please. That night, the hospital lobby was quiet. Security had cleared out the last of the reporters. Only the echo of rain against the glass remained. Claire stood by the entrance, exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. She didn't notice Michael sitting in the corner until he spoke. I wasn't waiting, he said softly. She turned. Then why are you here? To see if you'd look at me again, he said. Just once, she sighed. You don't give up, do you? Not when it matters. He rose, crossing the distance between them. They can say whatever they want. They can twist every word. But none of it changes what I know about you. She looked at him warily. And what's that? That you're brave enough to stand in the storm even when you hate it. Her throat tightened. I'm not brave. I'm just tired of being afraid. He nodded. Then let's stop being afraid together. For a long moment, neither moved. The rain outside softened into a whisper, tapping gently against the windows, like a heartbeat. Finally, Claire exhaled. You think this ends with a speech and a headline? I think it begins with a choice, he said. Yours. Her heart pounded in the quiet. She wanted to tell him to go, to leave her to rebuild what he'd broken. But instead, she said nothing. He took her silence for what it was, permission. And for the first time, she didn't step back when he reached for her hand. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't surrender. It was the smallest kind of courage, letting someone stay. The storm outside had passed, but inside the hospital, it still lingered. The press had stopped camping outside the doors. The board had gone quiet too, mostly because they didn't know what to do with a public relations mess that had suddenly turned into a national conversation. Michael Reed's declaration had sparked something bigger than scandal. Half the city thought it was a romantic fairy tale. The other half called it reckless idealism. For Claire, it was neither. It was survival. And survival, she was learning, came with a strange kind of stillness after the noise faded. 3 days had passed since she'd last spoken to him. Michael hadn't come to the hospital, and she hadn't reached out. Their last conversation, his quiet, "Then let's stop being afraid together," hung in her mind like an echo she couldn't silence. She told herself that space was good, that maybe now, without the cameras and gossip, they could breathe again. But that didn't stop her from glancing at the main entrance every time the glass doors slid open. On the fourth night, he came back. It was nearly midnight when she saw him, standing at the end of the hallway, rain still clinging to his coat, his expression unreadable. "Don't tell me you came to shadow the night shift," she said, breaking the silence. He smiled faintly. "Not tonight." "Then what are you doing here?" "I needed to see you," he said simply. She looked down at her clipboard, pretending to read. "You shouldn't be here, Michael. You know what people will think." He took a slow step closer. "I stopped caring about what people think when I realized how little it costs them to judge." "Easy for you to say," she said, her voice sharp but softening. "You don't have to work under the people who do the judging." He tilted his head. "You still think I don't understand what it's like to lose everything?" "You haven't lost anything," she said. He smiled sadly. "Haven't I?" That stopped her. For a moment she saw it, behind the calm, the weariness. He looked like a man who had burned everything he knew just to see what would rise from the ashes. "Michael," she began, but he shook his head. "I'm not here to make you feel sorry for me. I just wanted you to know something." She hesitated. "What?" "That I meant every word I said that day. I didn't stand in front of those cameras to play the hero. I did it because I couldn't stand the thought of you being humiliated for knowing me." Claire felt her throat tighten. "You made me part of your story." He met her eyes. "No, I gave you back the right to write your own." For a long time they stood there, the hum of the hospital machines filling the quiet. Finally, Claire said, "You turned my world upside down." "Then maybe it wasn't built right to begin with." Her laugh was small, fragile. "You think you can fix everything, don't you?" "No," he said softly. "Just the things that matter." They sat in the cafeteria long after the other staff had gone home. The air smelled faintly of coffee and bleach. Michael leaned back in his chair, watching her with that same steady focus that made her uneasy. "I'm resigning from the foundation," he said suddenly. She looked up, startled. "What? Why?" "Because the work stopped meaning something a long time ago," he said. "It became about numbers, not people. And after this, after you, I realized I want something real again." Her chest ached at the way he said it. "After you," like she was a turning point he hadn't expected. "So you're just walking away?" she asked quietly. I'm not walking away, he said. I'm starting over. She studied him. You make it sound easy. It's not, but maybe that's the point. Claire looked down at her hands. You think changing everything fixes the past? No, he said, but it gives it meaning. For a long while, neither of them spoke. Then she said almost to herself, You don't belong here, Michael. This isn't your world. He smiled. Maybe not, but every time I leave, I find myself trying to come back. You should stop, she whispered. You're not meant to live in my kind of chaos. He leaned forward, his voice low but firm. Maybe I'm not trying to live in your chaos. Maybe I'm trying to build something with you inside it. Her heart stumbled. You can't say things like that. Why? Because I'll believe them, she said. For a second, the air between them held, and then he reached across the table, fingers brushing hers, a touch so careful it felt like a question. Then believe them, he said, just once. When she left work that night, the sky was beginning to lighten, the edges of dawn blurring into the rain-soaked streets. She hadn't realized he'd followed her outside until she turned toward the parking lot. Claire, he called. She stopped. You should go home. He walked closer, stopping just beside her. The early morning air was cool, damp with fog. I don't know what happens next, and he said quietly. Maybe the world forgets us tomorrow. Maybe it doesn't. But I know I don't want to go back to pretending this didn't happen. She met his gaze, steady and searching. You really believe we could make this work? He smiled faintly. No, but I believe it's worth trying. The first light of morning touched his face, softening the sharp lines of his features. She studied him for a long moment, this man who had walked straight into her storm and never once looked for shelter. You'll regret this, she whispered. Maybe, he said, but not tonight. And then, for the first time, she didn't stop him when he leaned in. The kiss was quiet, hesitant, the kind that felt more like a beginning than a confession. When they finally parted, she didn't look away. Go home, Michael, she said softly, before the world wakes up. He smiled, his breath still uneven. Only if you promise I'll see you when it does. She didn't answer, but she didn't have to, because for the first time, Claire wasn't afraid of being seen. The next morning came too bright, too soon. Claire stood in front of her bathroom mirror, a cup of coffee growing cold on the counter. Her reflection looked different, not because of anything visible, but because of the quiet weight in her eyes. She hadn't slept, not after what had happened. She kept replaying it in her mind. The rain, the fog, the warmth of his hand against hers. The moment their defenses slipped and the world stopped mattering. Now the world was back, loud and merciless. Her phone buzzed again, lighting up with notifications she didn't want to see. Headlines, articles, photos. Someone had taken pictures outside the hospital last night. Billionaire CEO caught in late-night embrace with nurse. Michael Reed's equal finally revealed. Her stomach twisted. The story had turned intimate, invasive. What had been theirs was now public property. Claire shut off her phone and leaned her forehead against the cool mirror. What have I done? By the time she reached the hospital, the halls were electric with whispers. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was judgment. The cafeteria fell silent when she entered. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every pair of eyes turned toward her like a slow, suffocating tide. She walked past them with her head high, her heart beating too fast. Halfway through her shift, Dr. Ellison found her. He didn't bother with pleasantries. My office, now. She followed him, pulse pounding. When the door closed, he didn't sit. Claire, this is out of control. I didn't leak anything, she said immediately. I know that, he said. But the board doesn't care. They're worried about optics again. Donors are asking questions. So suspend me again, she snapped. Fire me? He looked at her for a long moment. I'm trying to protect you, not punish you. Claire let out a shaky breath. Then maybe stop treating me like the problem. Before he could respond, the door opened. Michael walked in. Mr. Reed, Ellison said, tension thick in his voice. This isn't a good time. I think it's exactly the right time, Michael said, calm but unyielding. He looked at Claire. You shouldn't have to stand in this alone. I told you to stay away, she said quietly. I know, he said, And I ignored you. I'm done hiding. Ellison frowned. You can't just... Michael turned to him. Actually, I can. I've already spoken to the board. I've resigned from the foundation. Ellison's mouth fell open. You what? Claire's eyes widened. Michael, no. He looked at her. It's done. I don't want my name attached to a system that punishes good people for being human. Do you have any idea what that means? She asked, her voice trembling. Yes, he said. It means I'm free, and so are you. Claire stared at him, anger and disbelief warring inside her. You think walking away from everything fixes this? It's not about fixing it, he said softly. It's about choosing what matters. Ellison rubbed his temples. You're both going to regret this. Michael's gaze never left hers. Maybe, but I won't regret standing beside her. Claire turned away, unable to meet his eyes. You shouldn't have done that. Why not? Because you're not built for this, she whispered. You think sacrifice makes you noble? But this is my life. I live in the consequences. You'll move on. I can't. He stepped closer, his voice steady. Then let me carry some of it. Her heart clenched. That's not how this works, Michael. You can't carry what you don't understand. He nodded slowly. Then teach me. Before she could reply, her pager beeped. A patient emergency. She turned toward the door, grasping at the distraction. I have to go. He caught her wrist gently. Claire. She stopped. I'm not walking away, he said. Not again. Her throat tightened. Then you're a fool. He smiled faintly. Maybe, but I'd rather be a fool with you than a coward without you. And before she could find the words to stop him, she was gone, racing down the hall, trying not to feel the weight of what had just happened. That night, the world was quieter. Claire sat in her apartment, the city lights spilling through the rain-streaked windows. She turned the umbrella he'd once given her over in her hands, tracing the worn handle. She thought about him, about how easily he'd stepped into her chaos and called it home, about how she'd spent her whole life surviving storms, never realizing someone might choose to stand in them with her. When her phone buzzed again, she almost ignored it, but then she saw the message. Michael Reed. Come outside. Her heart skipped. She hesitated, then grabbed her coat and stepped into the hallway. Outside, the rain fell soft and steady, the kind that blurred the city into watercolor. Michael stood by the curb, no umbrella this time, his hair damp, his expression raw and unguarded. What are you doing here? She asked, breathless. Keeping a promise, he said. Which one? That I wouldn't let you face this alone. She shook her head. You've already given up everything, Michael. What else is left? He took a step closer, his voice quiet but firm. Peace. For both of us. Her chest tightened. You think peace is something you can just find? He smiled sadly. No, I think it's something you build. With the right person. The rain fell harder, soaking through her coat, but neither of them moved. Finally, Claire whispered, You really don't know how to quit, do you? Not when it comes to you. And then, without another word, he reached for her hand. This time she didn't pull away. They stood there under the rain, two people who had been broken by the same world, finding something almost whole in each other's silence. For the first time in months, Claire didn't feel like she was drowning. She felt like she was finally learning how to breathe. The following week unfolded in slow motion, as if the world were holding its breath. The story that had once consumed headlines was beginning to fade, replaced by newer scandals and fresher controversies. But the ripples it left behind were still visible, in whispers, in glances, in the quiet unease that seemed to follow Claire wherever she went. She'd expected to feel lighter after the noise died down. Instead, she felt suspended between two worlds, the one she'd always known and the one Michael had dragged her into. He'd kept his promise. He didn't vanish, didn't retreat back to his ivory tower. He showed up in small ways, text messages asking if she'd eaten, quiet coffee left at the nurse's station before her shift, a note tucked beneath the lid, still standing with you. It was infuriating. It was comforting. It was him. On Thursday evening, Claire left work to find him waiting outside again. The rain had stopped for once. the air smelling faintly of wet asphalt and lilacs. "You know, this is becoming a bad habit," she said as she approached. Michael smiled. "Then I'll make it a good one." She shook her head, but there was a softness in her tone. "You really don't care what anyone thinks, do you?" "Not anymore," he said simply. "I've already lost the version of myself that did." "Is that supposed to be romantic?" "It's supposed to be honest." They walked together toward the park across the street, their footsteps in rhythm. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It felt earned. After a while, Claire said, "You gave up everything for this. Your foundation, your company's board seat, your reputation. I still don't understand why." He looked at her, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. "Because I wanted to see who I was without all of it, and because the only thing that ever felt real after all of that was you." She stopped walking. "You can't just say things like that." "Why not?" "Because you make it sound easy," she said. "Like we can just rewrite what the world sees." He took a step closer. "Who cares what they see, Claire? They don't live our story." She met his eyes, and for a moment, she let herself believe him. Then reality slipped back in. "Michael, people like you don't start over. You rebuild. You always land on your feet." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I don't want to this time." They reached the park bench where they'd first talked months ago, the night of her canceled date, the umbrella, the start of everything. The memory felt distant and fragile, like something from another lifetime. He sat beside her, watching the wind stir the trees. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked quietly. "Every day," she admitted. "Sometimes I wish I'd just gone home. None of this would have happened." "And sometimes," he asked. She smiled softly. "Sometimes I'm glad I didn't." Michael's expression gentled. "Then maybe it was meant to happen." "I don't believe in fate," she said. "Then believe in choice." The air between them thickened, the weight of everything unsaid pressing close. She turned to look at him. "You don't even know what comes next for you, do you?" He shook his head. "Not really. For the first time in years, I don't have a plan. It's terrifying." "And freeing," she said. He smiled. "You're not wrong." They sat there until the sun slipped behind the skyline, washing the city in gold. Finally, Claire said, "You know, there's still a chance this all ends badly. We might ruin each other." He turned toward her, eyes steady. "Or we might save each other." Her throat tightened. "You really believe that?" "I believe in you," he said simply. "And I believe in what this could be, if we stop being afraid to live it." The sincerity in his voice was disarming. It always was. She looked away, blinking back the sudden warmth behind her eyes. "You make it sound like the world won't keep trying to pull us apart." "It might," he said, "but it can't if we stop letting it decide who we are." Claire laughed softly. "You talk like someone who's used to winning." He smiled. "Only when I have something worth fighting for." For a moment she said nothing. Then she reached for his hand, slowly, deliberately. His fingers closed around hers, warm and steady. The park was quiet except for the whisper of wind and distant city sounds. "I used to think strength meant standing alone," Claire said after a while. "That if I just worked harder, stayed quieter, cared less, no one could hurt me." "And now?" he asked. She looked down at their joined hands. "Now I think maybe strength is letting someone stand beside you, even when you're scared to need it." Michael smiled, and for the first time, she saw relief in his expression, like he'd been holding his breath for months. They sat there as night fell, the streetlights flickering on one by one. "I don't know where this goes," Claire said softly. "Neither do I," he admitted, "but I know it's worth finding out." And just like that, the chaos of the last few months, the headlines, the judgment, the fear, felt small. For the first time, she wasn't just reacting to the world around her. She was choosing. Later, as he walked her back to her building, the rain began again. Soft, rhythmic, familiar. He stopped at the door, smiling as droplets clung to his hair. "Seems the rain doesn't want to let us go," he said. Claire took a deep breath, meeting his eyes. "Maybe it's not supposed to." He leaned in, resting his forehead against hers, the city blurring around them. "Then we don't run from it," he murmured. And this time she didn't. Spring arrived quietly as if the city had finally decided to stop holding its breath. The air carried the faint sweetness of new rain, and the first blossoms crept along the sidewalks outside the hospital. Claire stood by the large front windows, watching the light stretch across the marble floor, wondering how much had changed and how much she had. It had been 2 months since the noise faded, 2 months since the world stopped dissecting her life like it was a story that belonged to them. The headlines had moved on, the public found new scandals, and the foundation Michael once ran had officially named his replacement. He hadn't left the city, though. Every few days he would text her something small, a picture of the sunrise over the river, a note that said, "You're stronger than the noise," or sometimes just, "Coffee?" Sometimes she'd say yes, sometimes she wouldn't, but he never stopped asking. Today she said yes. When she stepped out of the hospital, he was there, waiting beside the same bench where they'd once argued in the rain. No suit this time, no entourage, no tension in his posture. Just Michael, with a paper coffee cup in each hand and that calm half-smile that somehow still made her forget how to breathe. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I wasn't sure either," she replied, taking the cup he offered. They began to walk down the quiet street, their steps falling into the same rhythm they always did. "How's the foundation?" she asked after a while. He chuckled. "Different without me. Better, probably." She gave him a sidelong look. "I doubt that." "No," he said, smiling. "I think it is. Turns out the world doesn't stop spinning when you let go." She sipped her coffee, studying him. "You really did it. You left everything." "I had to," he said softly. "I spent years building walls around myself and calling it success. Then I met you and realized walls don't keep you safe. They just keep you alone." Her heart tightened. "You make it sound like I rescued you." He shook his head. "No, you reminded me I didn't need rescuing. I just needed to be human again." For a long moment they walked in silence, the city moving around them, taxis rushing by, laughter spilling from nearby cafes, life going on. Claire finally asked, "So what now, Michael Reed? What does a man who's already had everything do next?" He looked thoughtful. "Something smaller, something that matters." She smiled. "Like what?" "Maybe a scholarship fund," he said, "for nursing students, or a clinic that doesn't turn people away because they can't afford care." Her eyes widened. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," he said. "You taught me that not everything worth building has to be measured in numbers." For the first time, Claire felt the weight she'd been carrying, fear, doubt, guilt, start to slip away. He wasn't trying to fix her anymore. He was learning to build beside her. They stopped at a small park near the hospital, the same one where their story had started on a night of rain and rejection. The same bench, the same soft hum of the city. But everything was different now. Michael sat down first, motioning for her to join him. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked. She laughed quietly. "You mean the one where I got stood up and you decided to interrupt my dinner?" "I prefer to think of it as divine timing," he said, grinning. She shook her head, smiling despite herself. "If you hadn't been there, I would have just gone home and forgotten it." "Would you?" Her voice softened. "Maybe not. Some people are too strange to forget." "Strange? In the best way," she said. He chuckled. "I'll take that." They sat there for a while, watching the clouds drift over the skyline. After a moment, he said, "You know, I used to think love was supposed to look like control, predictable, polished, perfect. But then I met you, and it looked like chaos. And for the first time, it felt real." Claire turned to him. "You don't regret it? Any of it?" "Not a single thing," he said. "Do you?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "No. Even when it hurt, it made me stronger." He smiled softly. "That's the difference between us, I think. You've always been strong. I just had to learn what that meant." Claire felt something warm spread through her chest, a quiet kind of peace she hadn't known she was searching for. "Do you still have it?" she asked suddenly. He frowned. "Have what?" "The umbrella," she said. His expression softened. "Of course." He reached into the small duffel beside him and pulled it out. The same old black umbrella, its handle still a little bent, the fabric slightly frayed at the edges. He handed it to her. I think it's yours now. She took it carefully, running her thumb along the handle. You sure? It's been through a lot. So have we, he said quietly, and we're both still standing. The wind picked up then, teasing the edges of her hair, carrying the faint smell of rain from somewhere far off. Claire smiled. You know, it's funny. That night, when you offered me this, I thought you were just being kind. And now? Now I think you are giving me a reason to see you again. Michael grinned. Maybe I was. They stood side by side, watching the clouds roll in again, the promise of another storm on the horizon. Looks like rain, he said. Always does, she murmured. But I'm not running from it this time. He reached for her hand, and she didn't hesitate. Together they walked toward the edge of the park as the first drops began to fall. This time, they didn't open the umbrella. They just let the rain find them. Warm, steady, alive. And somewhere between the thunder and the laughter, Claire realized that the storm no longer scared her. It was just the sound of something new beginning.